ancient and medieval water sources. So in medieval times and even in ancient times, the ancient kings and emperors and medieval kings and emperors, they had created thousands of water sources all over India. But during the British colonial periods, those water sources had all dried up because of ignorance and negligence. And what Swadhyaya Parivar has done is in Gujarat and Maharashtra, western part of India, they have gone out to these water sources and they have recharged these water tanks and other sources, just by simply making small canals to harvest the rainwater. The water is a big issue in Indian ecology, and so all these experiments they have done with the spirit of bhakti, the devotion. So the feeling here is that we are simply quenching the thirst of Mother Earth. So if we quench the thirst of Mother Earth will quench our thirst. So it's really an expression of divinity for Mother Earth. And
this is very, very important because in many parts of India the water table is in fact going down. So you have to dig deeper and deeper and use electric wells and whatever. Pankaj, our time is just about up. If members of went by really quickly. If members of our audience want to learn more about your book or about your article in HuffPost, where could you give us some online places to go?
Yeah, Huffington Post, if you go to the religion section and click on Hinduism, you can easily find 10 Hindu environmental teachings written by me, and which was originally written for Green Faith, an NGO, national NGO, interfaith partners for environmental action. So, and now it has appeared on HuffPost. And my book is coming out just at the end of this month, which is called as The Dharma and Ecology of Hindu Communities, based on my research with Bishnois and Swadhyay and Bhils of Western India, which is available on Amazon.com. And also, if you just Google, I guess, with my first name, Pankaj, Pankaj, last name Jain, and Hinduism or Jainism, you can easily find all my links.
Perfect.
To Google. Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you very much for being our guest. And we will hope to keep talking to you and learn some more about what's going on in India. So thank you, Pankaj Jain.
Sure. Thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Okay. This is Steve Barnett, your host for the Paradise Parking Lot, and we're going to go to our next guest. Our next guests, I think there are going to be two, and this, for those of you who are new listeners, will indicate just the range of topics that we cover in this show. Our guests are from Columbia University, and they've done some research, sociological research, on the way that people perceive local weather patterns. Is it cold? Is it raining? Is it, whatever? How do those weather patterns impact the way they think about climate change as a whole? We're going to be speaking with, I need a. Okay, and we need a no. Okay. I'm sorry. I confused our engineer for no reason. Our guest is Yi Li. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. He will help me, and he might be joined by his co-author, Lisa Zaval, and they have done this research. Welcome, Yi.
Hi, Steve.
How have I butchered your name?
No, you actually got it exactly right.
Okay. Random, I assure you. So you said that Lisa might be joining us.
Yep, I'm right here.
Okay, good. So we have both authors. Just summarize that publication and that project for us.
Sure. Well, I guess we could just start by talking to you about the event that really motivated this research. So if you think back to February of last year, you might remember that there were these record snowfalls in the mid-Atlantic region of the country, and Washington, D.C. in particular got hit by a lot of snow, and this storm soon gathered the nickname Snowpocalypse or Snowmageddon. And Snowmageddon had an interesting side effect, which seemed to be an increased skepticism in global warming. And we wondered, could one aberrant winter weather event really discredit years of accumulated evidence of global warming in people's minds? And this didn't seem to make much sense, which is why we decided to investigate it further. And so we examined this notion in 3 internet-based studies. We conducted study 1 last year when the United States was experiencing winter, and we simply asked participants to report their belief and concern in global warming. And we also asked them to indicate whether the local temperature in their town or city that day seemed to be warmer or colder than usual. We also collected some basic demographic information and zip code data. And now just collecting data, winter weather data seemed limited for this type of study, so just 1 week later we conducted the study in Australia asking participants the same questions. And then we also thought it would be interesting to see if we could observe any consequential behavior that might result from participants' attitudes. So we also told participants at the end of the study they had the opportunity to donate part of their experimental earnings to a real global warming charity, cleanaircoolplanet.com. And the results did show that those who thought today was much warmer than usual did donate significantly more of their earnings than those who thought today was much colder. Those who thought today was much warmer than usual were also much more likely to believe in and be concerned about global warming than those who thought today was much colder than usual. So those are our central results.
Okay. So basically what we have is, in spite of science, in spite of logical thinking, in spite of everything, you look out the window and that determines the way you're thinking about climate change. And I know this has validity because I live in New York and we also got hit by a tremendous amount of snow. And the refrain over and over again was, so where is this global warming? It's global cooling. It's too inviting a kind of a topic for people to lay off of, I think.
Right. There's actually a blog you can find. If there's global warming, then why is it so damn cold? I invite your viewers to search for it. It's just a listing of many political cartoons on this very theme. There is something very intuitively strong about. If you feel like there should be, on average, warmer temperatures, then why is it cold today? Which, if you think about it, I think our favorite quote from the paper is that this is kind of like thinking about the global economy and looking at the money in your wallet to determine that.
Yes, and in fact, I did some research that I think is in a sense runs parallel to yours, in which I asked people, are you doing something to help the environment? And what was included were even things as basic as sorting garbage, even if it was mandated by local law. And it turns out that people who think they're doing something to save or preserve the environment are more optimistic about the future of the environment. In other words, it's a classic American, the classic American notion of individualism. If I'm doing something, therefore it should have, a kind of significant consequence, even though what I'm doing may not really be very significant, or it may, in fact, the time scale and the of what I'm doing may be utterly irrelevant for what's going on in terms of global climate change. But still, people who felt they were doing something felt more optimistic.
And I think that's a really interesting result, Steve. And I would like to point out two, I think, important differences. One is that what I feel like the effect that you may have found seems like it'd be more of a kind of a conscious effect. People yes. Maybe since I'm sorting my garbage or I'm doing some other environmental action, that perhaps other people are also doing something like this. And perhaps almost rightfully so, then the causal chain suggests that we should be more optimistic about the future of our environment. But one of the key points that we make in our paper is that, unfortunately, it seems like this is an automatic or unconscious
right.
Whereby the local temperature that day affects you in a way that you don't realize.
Yeah, and I think one similarity of the studies might just be that clearly people do have this really myopic focus on immediate experience, and that's why, their belief about whether, their global warming is really happening or whether they feel positive about making changes, it's really, very malleable and then can change pretty frequently.
Right, and for most people, let's just say the United States without going to Europe or elsewhere, the plight of tiny island nations in the Pacific that might simply not be there if the oceans rise, or ice melts at the poles. Things like this are just so remote from everyday life. So we have, I think, a kind of an interest. I mean, people are at both ends. That is, they see what's happening right in front of them, and whether they react consciously or not to it, they react to the immediacy of it. And at the other end, there are these huge changes taking place, but they are extremely remote from people's everyday lives and extremely remote from media reporting as well. And so the gap, I think, is critical.
Yeah, that's definitely right. Although I did read a few days ago a report that New York City, where we both are, is actually a place that would very much be in trouble if global warming proceeds as predicted, since we are right on the water and
yes.
at sea level. So.
But it's again, it's interesting, and I think you folks are onto something, and there's a lot more research that needs to be done. When scientists say or make predictions of the order of, well, by 2050 the oceans will have risen by X percent. 2050, I think in Americans' minds, despite all of our talk about taxes and debt and grandchildren and whatever, I think 2050 just doesn't compute for most Americans. I think they're much more short-sighted. And I think there's a lot... Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, and this is, when we were trying to figure out what might be causing our effect, we think that because, global warming is such a contentious and complex issue, and it is really difficult to think about in terms of, it's such a long time scale, that this is why people might be substituting their judgment for something much simpler and more accessible, even if it's unconscious, which is just, maybe just the weather right outside.
Well, and the scary bit about that, in addition to just people not thinking about what about what's happening around the next curve, is that it becomes politically viable to exploit this kind of short-term approach, and there's no dearth of Republicans and even some Democrats who've used the weather outside their window as a way of critiquing measures to perhaps mediate some aspects of climate change. So what we're seeing is politicians following sort of public perceptions rather than leading, and in fact legitimizing public perceptions.
Yeah, it's a problem. One of the things that John Krosnick at Stanford, who does a lot of research on public opinion, has both found and tried to put forward is that the idea that even though the Pew Research surveys on people's beliefs in global warming have actually shown a decline in the belief in global warming, part of this could actually be because the studies have been run at different times, and that an effect very much like the one we found in our paper may be responsible for why there are these fluctuations. And right now, it seems like people believe it less. Perhaps next time the surveys run, it's going to be during an especially warm period of time in the U.S., and you'll find very different results. And what you say about the fact that politicians are just going with the flow of this is a big problem, because, as I like to point out, elections for most national elections are run in November, which is usually a period of time where people feel it's especially cold because the seasons are changing. And at least for me, I never seem to remember how cold it was last winter. I'm always surprised. Wow, it seems a lot colder than usual, and that might have a big effect on political elections.
Well, and the fact is that global warming or climate change is one of those things that if you ask people, quite apart from the time of the year that you ask them, they tend always to respond in a kind of a short-term, relatively short-term way, and it becomes very difficult to get the information out that would